Let's get started. So welcome everyone to Advocating for Educational Equity at the state level. My name is Mandara Myers. I'm the Vice President of Leadership Development and Design for Leadership for Educational Equity. And I am going to be facilitating the conversation today with Sanford Johnson and Rachel Cantor from Mississippi First. So I'm just going to take a minute and frame both the conversation that we're going to have and a little bit about how I've come to know Sanford and Rachel and their work over the past couple of years. And then I will go ahead and turn it over to them, but it's going to be a pretty interesting conversation, I think. So hopefully most of you know Leadership for Educational Equity. We are a partner organization of Teach for America that specifically works to support Teach for America alumni and core members who are interested in getting more involved with public leadership and civic engagement. And through my role in particular, I help to oversee all of our leadership development programs and have the pleasure of interacting with both Sanford and Rachel over the last few years through those programs. And I've been doing this work for about a decade of trying to figure out how to get more leaders who have firsthand experience advocating for and shaping policies that will be the best for their communities. And I can say without a doubt that Rachel and Sanford are among two of the top leaders I've had an opportunity to observe and work with. And I'm just honored to be able to facilitate this conversation with them today. So just briefly, I want to share a little bit about Rachel and Sanford, and then I will let them take the conversation over. But they have a pretty unique story, both individually and together. One of the things that is particularly unique is that Rachel and Sanford actually both grew up in Mississippi, grew up as childhood friends, and started Mississippi First together in 2009, in large part as a result of the experience that they both had teaching in Mississippi and Arkansas through Teach for America. So, what they're mostly going to focus on today is how their story relates to their teaching experience, to how they view opportunities for teachers to really shape and influence policy. And before they start, I just want to say that what is so impressive to me is not only how Rachel and Sanford have approached their work, but also what they've been able to accomplish over the last few years. So just to point to a couple of the highlights of their work, they were hugely influential in passing the first Charter Schools Act in Mississippi, which has created the opportunity for charters to exist in the state for the first time. In 2013, they were hugely influential in passing the Early Learning Collaborative Act, which has expanded access to early childhood education. And they've also been a critical player in expanding comprehensive sex education to over 30 of the highest need districts in Mississippi. So I hope that they will share more with us about each of those victories and what made it possible. But I am thrilled to be able to introduce them both and to learn from them along with you today. So I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Great. Well, we're so happy to see all of you today. Sanford and I looked at the agenda and decided we were going to do something a little bit different because this is an educators conference and we thought that we should talk more about teachers and how teachers can be involved in policy rather than just the history of our organization and what we do now, which we didn't know would be so interesting to you all. So I'm going to start with a story about my teaching experience and how that influenced the organization that we founded, which is Mississippi First, and Sanford's going to tell you a story as well. So I was a 2004 Corps member in Mississippi in a little town called Greenville, which is on the river in Mississippi. It's the largest town in the Delta, but I taught 7th grade English in middle school that just had 7th and 8th graders. And one of the interesting things to know about my school is that it had just gone to a block schedule the year that I was there, which meant we had 100-minute blocks every single day for English and math. Now that doesn't make a lot of sense for 7th graders. As you might know, 100-minute blocks is a very long time. But that was the case. So I taught there were 4 blocks in the day. I taught 3 of them and had a planning block. My first year teaching, my planning block was 2nd block. And my homeroom would go from my English class to math section. But we were in a school that had a principal who had not figured out the concept of creating an activity program schedule. So if we had a morning program, like a Black History Month program, or there was a speaker who came to talk to the students or whatever in the morning, we didn't have a bell schedule that accommodated both that and all 4 blocks. Because we were a school in which the lunch counts, the free and reduced lunch counts were so important, kids had to go to lunch every single day. They had to be counted every single day, which meant we always went to third block. So what happens if you don't have a morning bell schedule? You always have to go to third block and you have a morning program. Well, it basically meant we would go to homeroom, we would do homeroom, then we would go to the morning program. Then they would keep us in homeroom until it was time to go to lunch. And then the kids would go to third block and they would go to lunch. Which means they didn't go to second block probably 20 days out of the entire school year. Now my homeroom went from my class to math, like I said. So they missed 100 minutes of math instruction probably 20 times in the school year. That's 2,000 minutes of math instruction, right? And right. Now add to that the fact that their math teacher did not teach math every Friday because he believed they needed to rest. So in addition to the fact that they didn't get math every single Friday, they didn't get math at least 20 days out of the school year because my principal did not have a morning bell schedule. That was not a situation that I could solve from the vantage point of my English classroom. And it was not even really a situation I could solve banding together with other teachers because of the way that our school was structured. And so I started to think about what can I do that gets me into a place to affect systemic issues like what kinds of leaders we have in our schools who create conditions that make it very difficult even for very dedicated educators to serve kids. And the answer for me was to start a policy organization. So I'm gonna let Sanford tell you a bit about how he sort of came to the same conclusion from his classroom.
One of the big issues that I work on through Mississippi First is I work with comprehensive sex ed, which is always funny to say because there's nothing about me that would make you think that I would be leading that up. It really started with a conversation with a representative working on a memo. He was introducing a bill back in 2009 that would have required all public school districts to do sex ed, either abstinence-only policy or what we call an abstinence plus. And we sent him a memo, and it kind of started from there. Right now, I am one of 3 trainers in the entire state of Mississippi that trains teachers on comprehensive sex ed. I often tell people that we started with a conversation, one thing led to another before I know. Whenever I do the teacher trainings, I always bring it back to an experience that I had. I taught in Coahoma County High School, which is in Clarksdale, just about an hour north of Greenville. Just to tell you a little bit about my school. When I first got there, my first interview with my principal, she was running in a superintendent's race, running against the assistant superintendent in sorority sisters. And it was the most heated race for superintendent that the county had ever seen. My principal won, so she left us after Christmas. I ended up having 4 principals that year because the next principal came in and she was there for 2 weeks. I really liked her. I thought she was really good. She really had the school under control, but it turns out she was also a consultant. And the board told her, well, you can't do both. You're either going to have to be the principal or you're going to have to be the consultant. So she was out. So she decided to leave. Then the assistant principal that had lost, the assistant superintendent that lost the race was then our principal. And she stayed for about a month before they got in somebody out of retirement. So we really need school leaders in the Delta, so I may be recruiting some of you at some point. But the story that I like to tell related to sex ed is the only amount of sex education that my students received during my first year of teaching. And I was a U.S. history teacher, so I know they weren't learning anything in health either, but the only thing they received was a program in the morning. It was like 45 minutes. This guy came in and basically told students that condoms don't work, so be abstinent. What he says specifically, and if you're from Mississippi, you may have heard the story already, so I apologize, but he told students, he came out, I'll always remember him because he had on one of those sweater vests with no shirt on under it because he's got the gun showing. It's like that guy that sends kids to boot camp on Mark Povich. So he came up and he told kids that when you make a condom and when you drive it from the factory to the store, it loses half of its effectiveness. When you drive it, and the time it takes to drive it from the store to your house, it loses another half of its effectiveness. When you take it out of the wrapper, when you expose it to air, it loses another half of its effectiveness. And that's what he told students. That's the only thing they got from the entire presentation. So I asked my students, let's write a reflective paragraph. Let's see what you got out of that. And every student remembered that one line. And I think what he was wanting the students to get out of that was, wow, condoms don't work. I need reaction. What the kids got out of that is condoms don't work. Why am I wasting my time buying condoms? So that was the major takeaway. In a high school that was in the county with the highest teen birth rate in the state, the highest chlamydia infection rate in the state, with one of the highest HIV infection rates in the state. So that's the story that I always come back to whenever I lead a sex ed session with teachers. And I think if you went through all the different issues that we talk about, we can always bring it back to an experience that we had in the classroom, whether it's pre-K. My wife, who eventually opened up KIPP Elementary School, started off as a second grade teacher, and she told us a lot of stories about the second graders that she saw them grade levels behind. When we talk about charter schools, we talk about some of the examples of schools that are performing very well, but they're outside of the state of Mississippi. They're either in Memphis or they're in Arkansas. So it's led to a lot of questions about, one, how can we get these high-performing schools in Mississippi? And then the second part is, what are these schools doing that's great that we can replicate in every public school in the state? So when you look at all the different policy issues that we're working on right now, along with the policy issues that we may be working on in the future, they always come back to stories about Coahoma County or Coahoma Middle School.
I think that we both had these experiences, and then what we did is we both went to graduate school. And when I was in graduate school, I wrote the business plan the second semester of my second year in graduate school. Sanford was in graduate school at the time as well, and the day we graduated, we got our C funding. And so when we set out to start Mississippi First, and we eventually wrote this business plan, being a classroom teacher had a tremendous impact on that business plan and what we do every single day. This would not be the same organization if we had just come from it from a perspective of studying about education, having been Mississippians ourselves, having gone through public school in Mississippi ourselves. We wouldn't have the deep appreciation and understanding of these issues that we do if we had not taught. And what we see now when we do our work in Mississippi, because there's not really any other organization like ours in Mississippi. When we started, we were one of very few policy organizations at all in the state of Mississippi, and we're the only policy organization that is dedicated to education specifically. And when we started to talk to people in the legislature, in the Department of Education, being able to say, I was a teacher, and I know what this is like, and I know what kids in low-income communities face. I have taught them. They have names. They have stories. They're not numbers to me. They're not caricatures to me. That really, I think, has had an impact on our ability to very quickly become credible in the eyes of policymakers and power players in the legislature. And so I can't say enough about the importance of being in the classroom and now doing the job that I do now. And I think that Sanford's right. Being a teacher is what drives every piece of policy work we do, and it drives us to get out of bed in the mornings when it seems like we're facing a huge and sometimes intractable problem. But we want to talk about not only how the organization came out of our own experience, but how we see a huge need for an informed teacher voice in policy at the state level. And I want to preface this by saying that teachers are not a monolithic group. People have among the teaching community, there are a variety of opinions on all sorts of issues that we work on. And there are people who are more or less informed about even the broader implications of what they do every day in their classroom. But I will never say that I don't want to hear what a teacher has to say about her own experience or his own experience in their classroom. Because so often when we are at the state level and we're talking about policy, the people in the room have never really lived this experience. And we will go in the room and we will be some of the only people who've ever had that experience. experience. They might have a brother, a sister, a wife, a husband, someone else, but they haven't lived it and bled it in a way like you have when you've gone through a Teach for America experience or any classroom experience. And I think that when we start talking about teacher voice, we need to make sure that we are elevating the experiences not just of teachers who teach in the high-performing in Mississippi we have school districts and schools that are seen as sort of premier schools, the schools that everybody wants to teach in, that everybody wants to work in, that everybody wants to send their kids to. And they do get a lot of press. They get a lot of interest from legislators. But there's a real lack of voice from people who teach in the communities that we have a special place in our hearts for, the low-income communities, especially communities in the Delta region of Mississippi. There's not enough teacher voice from those regions at the state level and at the power level. And it's because I think it's an access question, but we try to provide a bridge to those people. And I want Sanford to talk a little bit about the ways that we've tried to engage teachers in the policy work that we do and how that has impacted the ability we've had to bring about change.
So I think there are two major things that teachers bring to the policy table, and I definitely see that in Mississippi. One is leverage, and the reason I say that is because honestly, your schools need you, our communities need you as well, and I think that gives you an upper hand in terms of policy, and it gives you the opportunity to say, I can stay here, I can make this my home, but this is the kind of school that I need. And I also think about the fact that, the game sort of changed a little bit when I became a parent. And when I sit in education meetings, sometimes Sanford Johnson, Deputy Director of Mississippi First, shows up. And then there are other times Lorelai's dad shows up. And Lorelai's dad is a lot more confrontational, and he doesn't deal with nonsense in the same way. So I think, when you think about the schools that you're teaching in, when you think about the districts that you're teaching in, I think it's always important to ask yourself, is this the kind of place where I would like my children to go to school? Is this the kind of place where I would want my children to go for elementary school, middle school, and high school? And if the answer is no, then you need to ask yourself, well, what's missing? And if it's missing for your child, then it's missing for the children that you also teach. So I think that's a major point of leverage. Another thing, and this has come up a lot, is trust. You have the trust of your parents. Your parents know you. They know you in the community. They have seen you I don't know how many of you are from rural areas, but they've seen you at Walmart, they've seen you at church, they've seen you at Wendy's. Like, these are places that they see you in Clarksdale. But, it really came out, going back to the example about sex ed, what we ended up doing was getting districts to adopt a sex education policy. And there were so many questions because so many districts had never done this, had never taught sex ed before, never had policy, never taught an actual program. And it really made a difference to get parents on board when we were able to tell them, we're not bringing in folks from outside of your community. We're not bringing in folks from a health center. We're not bringing in folks from Jackson. We're not bringing in folks that you've never seen before. The people that are going to be teaching this are teachers that you already know and you already trust them. So I think it meant a lot for parents to hear from their health teacher, maybe even a health teacher that in some cases the parents even had, because we've had teachers that have been around that long. For them to say, this is specifically what I'm going to be teaching your child. Here's the curriculum. Here are the activities. And based on those lessons that we learned for sex ed, we think that that's something that can also be very important in Common Core. Our former state superintendent did several town halls around the state, and I don't think they were that good, to be perfectly honest. It was just a long PowerPoint presentation. You couldn't even read the slides. It was very dry, and if you came in with major concerns, there was a good chance that those concerns were never raised, because I just don't think it was, I'm a policy person, and I didn't even think that they were, very informative. I think what's really working, and we've seen some teachers start to do this in Mississippi, is for math teachers and for reading teachers to actually bring parents to the school and say, this is what Common Core means in my classroom. This is what your students are going to be doing. This is what I'm going to be teaching that's different from what I was doing last year. And again, we're talking about teachers that the parents already know and already trust. And I think when parents get the opportunity to hear from that they already know, I think it kind of alleviates some of those concerns. If they have a major question, they can ask a teacher that they already know and know that they're going to get a truthful answer. So that's something that we're going to be working on in the future, is getting teachers to actually start doing these parent meetings. And we feel like they're going to be the best messengers for Common Core. A lot of teachers have not received the information that's necessary, so we're going to hopefully help them with that too. And we're going to be providing information to the Department of Education to give advice on what we need to be telling our teachers so they can be the messengers for Common Core.
One of the things that was really interesting for us when we started working is that the Mississippi Department of Education did their first ever real teacher survey, where they asked teachers, what do you think about your school? And one of the most striking findings was that when they asked administrators, how do teachers like your school? And then they asked the teachers, how do you like your school? There was a huge gap in the way that teachers perceive their work in their school and the way administrators perceived it. Administrators would say things like, oh yeah, teachers here feel supported, we really help them, we really develop them as people and professionals, and teachers were like, no, not at all. And I think that underscores the need to talk directly to teachers from a policy perspective. Oftentimes, the way that these conversations happen at the state level is that the Superintendent's Association gets up and talks to legislators. The School Boards Association gets up and talks to legislators. And you might have some teacher professional organizations there that they may or may not have had, have been in the classroom in a really long time. In Mississippi, we are a right-to-work state, so those organizations cannot collectively bargain. And so they're not very powerful at all. And it leaves this enormous void in the conversation for teachers. And just trying to take the word of superintendents about what's going on in the district, or the School Boards Association about what's going on in the district, is just not adequate. And we have tried to fill that void a little bit with our own experience, but we're realizing more and more that we need to expand the table, the number of the people who have access to legislators. And so we're going to start trying to organize teachers for the first time around Common Core. We're actually doing short videos talking to real classroom teachers. What has your experience been like teaching Common Core math? What's your experience been like teaching Common Core English? And then we're going to make those videos available to the public, but we're also going to put together sort of a teacher brain trust. And bring really great teachers together to ask, what are you struggling with in your classroom? What's working really well? And what do other people need to know about the real job that you're doing? And then try to translate those lessons into policy work. Because no matter how many times you hear about, teachers think this, teachers think that, it's really just anecdotes from one teacher that one person spoke to. There's not really a great, especially in Mississippi, a great pipeline for real teacher voice in these conversations. And so we're going to try to fill that void a little bit. I guess the last thing we wanted to talk about were lessons that we've learned.
Yes, lots of lessons learned. My big lesson is when you identify an issue that you really want to advance, whether it's in your school, whether it's in your district, or whether it's on the state level, keep pushing. You've got to keep pushing. And the reason I say that is because you will have pushback. There will be people that will resist anything that you do. When you're getting people when you're trying to change a policy, when you're trying to change anything on any level, it's going to make some people uncomfortable. And when you make people uncomfortable, that's when you know that you're in the right place. If you're not making anybody uncomfortable, then you're not pushing hard enough. So always remember that. And folks are going to give you every single reason in the world why you can't do something. We heard so many different reasons why we can never get a charter school law passed on a state like Mississippi. Like our history won't allow it. We're not supporting our traditional public schools, which is true, but we need to have some additional options too. Folks gave us every reason why we can never get a pre-K law passed in the state of Mississippi. Like legislators would never go for it. There were many times when we even had a presentation from an intern who actually works on our staff now. Did this wonderful presentation. There were legislators there that said, yeah, it was a great presentation, but we can't afford it. So There were so many people that told us, why we couldn't pass the sex ed law. So you're going to have that pushback. Another thing that we've noticed, another lesson learned, and why you have to keep pushing, is that there are always people, especially in Mississippi now, where we have a very toxic political environment, not just in terms of party, but also in terms of racial politics. There are always people that are trying to force us to take a side. You're either with us or you're with them. You're either with the Democrats or you're with the Republicans. You're either with this group or you're with that group. And we're a nonpartisan public policy nonprofit, which means there are some times where, Republicans love the issue that we're working on. Sometimes they hate the issues that we're working on. Some of the same folks that supported our work in charter schools, when they found out that we supported Common Core, some of those same senators were like, you need to go back home and look at your values and, having those conversations. There were some people that I really butted heads with on the charter school issue among African American leaders that became some of my best friends when we were working on sex ed, because they understand in African American communities, a lot of the communities that we work with in the Delta, we have very high teen birth rates. And there has been no medically accurate information that's been provided in years. So some of those same people became some of our biggest allies trying to get policies adopted there. So folks are going to try to put you in one camp or the other, but you have to continue to say, as long as you're doing your homework and as long as you're building support for whatever issue, you've got to keep moving forward. And don't let people try to box you in. So always remember to keep pushing, regardless of folks trying to box you in or folks trying to provide any resistance.
So I would say that one of the top lessons we learned is a lot of humility. When you do the work that you do in a classroom, you learn humility very quickly, very quickly. You're not the rock star teacher you thought you were going to be. It's hard. It's truly a work of art when someone does it very well. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to be an excellent teacher. And policymaking is no different. And we like to think that as ambitious, highly achieving people that we have all the answers, and we really don't. I think we have a lot of answers about how we're going to solve educational inequity in this country. And I think that we are not moving fast enough on a lot of those answers. But I don't think we have all of them yet. And I think we have to always be humble about what we don't know and how to listen to people who have perspectives and viewpoints that we don't agree with and that seem completely bizarre to us, but we have to listen. And we have to not engage in the conversation about, no, I like children more than you. No, I like children more than you. Because that's just a very destructive conversation. And I think a couple of years ago, when I would hear people say things like, this is not what's best for children, and I'm doing what's best for children, and I would say, yeah. But then when we were engaged in the charter school fight, I had someone come up to me and scream at me about how I obviously did not love children. And it made me really stop and think, there can be people who have very honest disagreements about what's best for our communities and best for our kids, but we all love children. And yeah, there are some people who care about adults and they don't care about kids at all. But if we start from that place always and we just want to get in this name calling, we're never going to get to a productive solution for so many of our kids and so many of our communities. And we've got to figure out how to have a conversation and not let it get so toxic. And we've seen other places in this country that have gotten very toxic in the last couple of years, and it's really, really tragic. And I don't think any one person is responsible for it. But I think Sanford and I, in our work in Mississippi, we try to, as best as possible, keep that in mind, that we're all Mississippians, we all love children, and we really are trying to move our state forward, even when we have very deep disagreements with people. The other thing I'd say that we've learned is that a little goes a very, very long way. And I think that we have earned the right to say this because we have worked in this field at our organization for 6 years with a very teeny tiny budget and have been able to do a lot of big things. And I think it's because it's very true that we live in a place, Sanford and I, in the country that is very forgotten by a lot of people. And in those places, a little goes a very long way. And for the people who live in them and love them and, you know, want them to be home, we have to be the ones who take this challenge on. And because nobody is going to come in from outside to do it for us, and even if they tried to, it would be very difficult. But with a little bit of persistence and a little bit of effort, we've been able to do a lot. And I would encourage all of you that if it's possible for us in Mississippi, it is possible for you anywhere, regardless of where you are, regardless of how small your town is, or you know how poor your community is. And I would also say that even though working in the field that we are in the place that we are in, gives me a lot of hope because of how far we've come in 6 years, we still have a long way to go, a long way to go. And it's going to take more than my career, your career. It's going to take, it could take 50 years, but 100 years. But we've got to push, because if we don't push, no one else is going to push. How long did we go?
You're great.
4 o'clock.
Do you want to open up for one or two questions?
Yes.
Great. So we have just a few minutes left, but if there are one or two questions for Rachel and Sanford, I'd love to hear them. Let's go here and here.
I'm Meg McCormick, I'm a 2009 member from Hawaii. And I said that I met you at the lead conference.
Oh, yes,
So,
hey.
Yeah. So, and I was really, it was great to learn about what you guys were doing. In Hawaii, we were having a problem engaging teachers because those passionate, knowledgeable teachers that want to engage in educational advocacy are also the busiest in the classrooms. How do you guys engage a really motivated and dedicated body of educators to help you in the advocacy work that you do? And what are some even small strategies you do just to get teachers to meetings, get teachers to meetings?
That's some of the stuff that we're actually learning right now. In fact, partnering with LEAD, we've started doing the community organizing. So we're doing house meetings all over the Delta, and it is very challenging to try to get busy teachers to come to a house meeting. One thing that we're doing to try to help with that is to give teachers a sense that we're not asking you to do it all by yourself, but if you build a big team, then not everybody has to do everything. It can be as small as, here, write an email to this particular person, this particular representative. One thing that we're also working on that we think will help is not just making sure that we're not just organizing core members, but we're also organizing teachers that are from traditional routes or other routes. We also need to involve people in the community, and it kind of goes back to that comment about trust. Your parents trust you, so you can get the parents involved in these conversations as well. Parents that you see at the school, parents that you don't see at the school. Start having those conversations. What do you think about the school that you're in right now? What do you think should change? And if you ask the parents, they will tell you. Parents know what's working and what's not working in their school, but the problem is nobody ever asks them. So if you get parents involved, get other teachers involved, and build a strong network, then what that shows teachers is that we're not just asking you to try to lift this burden all by yourself, but you've got a good network to work with.
Sanford also mentioned the university piece.
Oh yes, we also have college chapters. We have one college chapter right now at Ole Miss, and we're looking to do more organizing on other campuses. And one of the big reasons we want to do that is it's all part of our grand strategy to get people to stick around in the state of Mississippi. I recruit a lot. Recruiting is one of the things that I really work on. And we want to get students that are not only going to stick around in Mississippi to be teachers, but also we want to get people involved in the policy making process. When Rachel and I started going to meetings in Jackson, we realized that everybody in the room was old. Nobody had young kids that were in the system. Nobody was from our generation. And I think our generation of Mississippians are so important because we're the first generation to truly experience integration. The fact that Rachel and I were able to ride the same bus together in elementary school is something that previous generations of Mississippi Mississippi did not get to experience. And because of that experience, we don't have the same divisions that other generations have had. We don't have the same partisan or racial or economic divisions that a lot of other generations have. I'm not saying that those divisions don't exist, but we're able to communicate and work together in ways that previous generations simply have not been able to. So I think it's important for our generation to get involved. With the college students, we've had a lot of students that have gone through Teach for America, which we love, and now we've got folks that are involved in other public policy organizations. So our goal is to try to get as many young people involved in policymaking in Mississippi as possible.
You also had one final question?
Yeah, Charles McDonald with Teach for America, South Carolina. I'm curious if you all could speak on, you talked a little bit about leading support that you're seeing there. I'm curious if you all could speak on supports that you're seeing from TFA regionally and nationally, both on the front end and continued supports that you found to be very effective.
So it's kind of funny you asked that. So we founded in 2008 actually, and when we founded our organization, there was no social innovation fund, social entrepreneurship focus, none of that. So we were really kind of going it alone in a lot of ways from that perspective. What has been interesting is that because of where we do our work, we are very connected to the Mississippi core, because it is our core and our home state and where we do our work. And that relationship has been invaluable to us, learning and everything, even though there wasn't the sort of structure from TFA National to be like, this is how you put together a nonprofit and this is how you go about this business. We started to do some Lee workshops probably 3 or 4 years into our work in the last 2 or 3 years. And around organizing, that's been very helpful with our new organizing focus and that sort of thing. I think that we're I'm a little bit jealous actually of people who have nonprofit ideas now and want to start nonprofits now, because there is so much more support from TFA National and from Lee, and just learning and developing people on how they want to do that we were like right before that happened. And we try to share as anything we can, lessons learned for how that we went about starting our organization.
I feel like my dad saying, y'all don't know how good y'all are.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking Rachel and Zach. I think again, just both the wisdom and experience that they've shared today, but also the persistence, the humility, the relentlessness with which they have done their work in Mississippi. It's just phenomenal, and I think we've all taken some good lessons away, both in terms of the policy and advocacy world, but also how as teachers, your voice can be so influential in shaping decisions that are being made about your students. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.